Calling the meeting to order. We obviously have quorum. I would like to appreciate Iden Lynch for position on the chair for the last year. Thank you very much. And then we'll do roll call. Anderson,
Aye. Here.
Iden Lynch,
Here.
Frazier,
Here.
Gade,
Here.
Grimm, Harrelson,
Here.
Murray,
Here.
Shetty,
Here.
Silliman,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
and Sturdivant here. Are there any staff members that would like to identify themselves?
Sarah Gardner present.
Daniel Bissell.
Diane Platt.
Thank you
And
much.
Sarah Walls.
Next is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. I don't have the date. They were included in today's packet. Any corrections that are needed? Is there a motion to approve minutes?
Frazier, I shall move.
And
Shetty seconds.
motion passes. Any members of, no members of the,
Well, I think you need to call for a vote.
oh, sorry. Is there a vote on approval of minutes for last month's session?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, public comment. It doesn't look like we have any members of the public present, but for the new people on the commission, members of the public who would like to speak regarding items not on the agenda are each welcome to address the commission for up to 3 minutes. Due to public meeting laws, commissioners cannot engage in discussion or take any action on an item not already listed on the agenda. That means we can listen to your comments but cannot comment on or discuss them at this time. Any topic that is brought up will be considered for inclusion in a future agenda for more full discussion. Good. And next agenda item is announcements.
Yeah, so we had a couple of action items from the last meeting. One was to contact Tyler Baird, our city forester, to come in and talk to you about our tree planting efforts and natural areas master plan. We have reached out to Tyler. He is planning to join us for our May meeting. And then we were also to contact Sarah Walls to talk about the bicycle master plan. As you can see, Sarah is joining us today. Under upcoming events, you're going to see the first item listed is the Procter & Gamble presentation to City Council. As you may recall, we were trying to get Procter & Gamble to come. They are still willing to do so, but because the City Council has requested that they come and present on basically the same thing, we thought to make efficient use of everyone's time, we would defer to the City Council as the higher governing body and have them present there first. I will share a recording of the meeting, a link to that recording of the meeting given, or where they present to City Council to all of you so that you have a chance to review it. And if after that you would like them to come in for further discussion, we can certainly invite them to do so. And then you'll notice under the other upcoming events, we have 2 events being organized by our AmeriCorps members coming up one's coming up this month, one's coming up next month. The first is local government sustainability efforts, and that will be featuring a number of representatives of local government, not just Iowa City, but Johnson County as well. Those of you who remember Becky Soglin, she'll be at that event if you have any interest in attending. We have the Earth Expo, which then will follow in April 6th. This is, generally speaking, a tabling event for area resource agencies involved with different kinds of climate action or environmental causes. And then our Neighborhood Energy Blitz is scheduled for this year for April 20th. That, of course, is our volunteer event where we go door to door in a targeted neighborhood to deliver energy-saving devices. Some of you I know have participated in this in the past. You are all welcome to do so. If anybody is interested in signing on as a volunteer, you just need to reach out to Megan Hill, and she'll get you the links you need and the information. And just as a reminder, there is both a morning and afternoon volunteer shift for that, in case your schedule allows for one but not the other.
What neighborhood are they doing this year?
Washington Hills, which if you're unfamiliar is the neighborhood that is east. It sort of is sandwiched between First Avenue and Scott, and it's north of Court Street. So a lot of nice 1970s and 80s split-level houses with very little insulation.
Can I ask a question about the P&G presentation?
Yes.
You said they were presenting about the same thing to city council as they would have presented here, and I was just trying to remember. I thought they were coming here as a representative of just kind of industry as we looked at our visioning stuff. And that's what they're also talking to city council about, or?
What they're talking to city council about, one of the things when we were inviting them in to talk about the visioning process was to talk about what does sustainability look like from an industrial entity, and they are going to be addressing that in their presentation to city council. They're also going to be talking a bit about the proposed rezoning for the plot of land that they have acquired, but the two, of course, go hand in hand. So our thought was they're essentially going to cover what they would have talked about here, plus some more stuff. So you'll be able to hear all of that in the recording.
This is Shetty. While we're talking about events, I just wanted to mention that the UI Office of Sustainability has an Earth Month hub on the website, and you can submit any events that are happening, and we would be happy to market and amplify those events for you too.
This is Sturtevant. Just like a question regarding the P&G presentation. If, like, you send it out to us and we have questions, are we going to do like a formal, hey, we have questions, let's invite it back? Or do you want people to email saying, hey, I have a couple questions, and see what the response is from that?
I think either approach works. I think a little bit we'll have to see what arises after we send out the link, but certainly you can email me with initial questions and we could reach out to them via email and see if they'd like to provide a written response, or if we think it'd just be easier to get them in the room and have a conversation, we can do that as well. And I do want to be very clear, this is not them saying that they don't want to come to speak with us. Like, they were very clear that they'd be happy to do so, and had two people picked out. It just, we thought from a staff perspective, it didn't make sense to have them deliver essentially the same conversation twice, especially since part of what we're trying to do is have that conversation on behalf of the city council, right? So now they're just going to the head honchos themselves.
Any unfinished ongoing business?
Yeah, always. So the first thing under unfinished ongoing business is our climate action and adaptation plan updates and discussion. Those of you who've been on the commission before will know we try to give these to you roughly every 3 or 4 or 5 months, depending on what the schedule allows. We haven't had one since last October, partly because we've just been so busy with so many other things on the schedule. So we wanted to give you an update on where we're at with several initiatives. Those of you who are new, generally what we do is provide a summary that you would have seen in your agenda packet that looks like this, that runs through all the new notable items. And then behind that, we provide a spreadsheet that lists every item under the accelerated action plan. So you can go back and see what has been done in the past if there isn't anything highlighted under new actions. And because this is really the bread and butter of what you all are here to do, which is oversee our actions, generally what we've been doing when we present these to the commission is giving everybody just a few minutes to read through them, and then open the floor for any questions or comments. In particular, if there are any you would like to hear more details about, it's your chance to say, could you tell us a bit more about this item listed here? Or could you tell us a bit more about this item that wasn't included in the update and where we're at with that? I will also note, for those of you who have been involved in these discussions all along, we did eliminate a column from the spreadsheet, in part because we've been at this for several years now, and that spreadsheet is really filling up. There was a column to the far right that talked about opportunities for the commission to weigh in on particular items. And that was really a holdover from the very early days of the commission when we were trying to figure out what kind of working groups are we going to form, what are actions that folks could propose to take. What we've found in subsequent meetings is it really has gotten referred to less and less in the last 2 years, not at all. And so in the interest of creating more room to provide more updates about the things we're doing, we eliminated that column. But of course, if you have any questions about things the commission could do on those items, please do raise that question, and we'll be happy to talk about it.
This is Sturvin. I have a question regarding, like the first point. I know there have been several meetings with like contractors in the area. Is this like another event that is going on, or is that just kind of like a closed door meeting?
It's not closed door, and we're quite excited about, this is in reference to the first item, the collaboration we have underway with the Midwest Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative. Those of you who've been involved with our discussions with heat pumps know that we have looked quite longingly at Minnesota's Heat Pump Collaborative and all the wonderful information they put out, including contractor trainings. We had an opportunity identified by Daniel Bissell after a conference he attended to reach out to the Midwest Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative and say, we would love to host a contractor training here. We are actually, this is a much bigger collaboration. It's not just us. We are actually helping organize the event for Eastern Iowa. So we'll be inviting contractors, not just from Iowa City, but also from Cedar Rapids, Cedar Falls, Waterloo, Dubuque, and Davenport to come. And we're in conversation with Des Moines, which is having another event the same week to engage contractors there. So it's really a statewide push that a number of climate action and sustainability offices have been working on to bring in folks who represent the different manufacturers of heat pumps and provide the most up-to-date information and training for our contractors possible, including information on accessing rebates and tax incentives, both through the manufacturer and through the IRA. Our event is going to be held at the Kirkwood campus up in Cedar Rapids. And one of the things that we'll be able to do is follow up with the contractors who participate in it. In fact, we've been in conversation with Cedar Rapids about trying to develop a resource that would serve the corridor, so both our communities and all the communities in between, that identify contractors who would be willing to talk to folks after undergoing this training who are interested in getting a heat pump. What we'd like to do is actually create a more comprehensive resource so that it would include also solar developers in our area, plumbers for folks who are interested in getting air source heat pump water heaters. Yeah, so a lot of great things happening here. Thank you so much for asking. It is primarily targeted at contractors. It is free to attend. If anybody is interested in sitting in and listening to the conversation that happens that day with contractors, we can certainly get that information.
We're just doing open questioning. Oh, open question time? Okay. I was wondering if you could tell us more. This was in the transportation section of the update in the long-term priorities, and I think it's TR2. I was wondering if you could tell us more about that one, about requiring climate change analysis for new subdivisions and rezonings.
Boy, I'd love to. This is actually, TR2 is an item, and it's worded exactly this way. It comes from the Accelerated Action Plan. It's one of the action items that's been identified as a Phase 3 action. And to be perfectly honest, we don't know exactly what was meant by that. So one of the things we've been doing is having conversations with folks who were present when the Accelerated Action Plan was developed to say, does anybody remember what this meant or what we were intending to do with it? We haven't really come across anyone who remembers it, but because it's under the transportation section, our thought is it may refer to just thinking about traffic impacts for any new zoning or subdivision, figuring out how that affects traffic patterns. The wild card is, I think we already do that analysis, don't we? Yeah. So we're trying to figure out what it means to do that over and above. And that is why it's under long-term. But we're trying to figure it out and hope to have some updates to you stemming from those conversations.
Yeah, John Fraser, no one's called me, but that's specifically correct, I believe. I recall the conversations, particularly relative to the east side of Iowa City, the southeast, I'm sorry, let me think about this. West side of Iowa City, the southwest corner of Iowa City, specifically brought this up about additions and additional streets, and I think you're right on. That specific area and that specific growth was what triggered that conversation.
That's helpful. Thank you, John.
This is Einan Lynch again. The reason I'm curious about it is because this seems like an opportunity to me to consider issues around equitable development when in a rezoning process. And because we know that climate change will present tough challenges, especially in low-income or overburdened neighborhoods, I think that this priority is an opportunity to build in equitable development strategies into the process where these communities tend to be overlooked or disregarded. So I'm just curious, like, if we're still figuring out kind of what that means, if we can have some conversation about that and where we could push our processes a little bit.
And again, that area south of Raret Road, there was a big discussion about how much growth there was going to be and what the access to that expanded area was going to be, and how do you get from 380 into that area as opposed to just from Raret Road. And it had equity issues, it had climate cost issues, it had transportation issues, and I don't know where that's gone since we had those initial conversations. But that area south of Raret, growing and growing, growing, really what triggered all of this.
That's helpful background. We really appreciate it. Little
When
by
you're
little.
118 years old, you sometimes remember some of these things.
This is Sturdivant regarding the TR2. Is that above and beyond new building codes? Is this like a separate issue, or is it just, what Fraser said about specific areas? Okay.
Yeah, we don't know. I think that's part of what we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
Both to figure out what is the current practice and what it might mean to add something to it, whether it's a one-time, like it was addressing a specific area of Iowa City, or whether it was meant to operationalize some new level of analysis. But we'll keep sleuthing and we'll come back to you on this one.
And again, one more quick comment. Yes, we were talking specifically about that area south of Raret Road and all the complications that growth would cause related to our interests, and develop a model on that specific challenge that we could apply across the board to other similar areas as time goes on. So that model is, I think, the challenge. And all the categories of what we need to face in that model, equity being one of them. I can't remember what I had for lunch, but I do remember that.
This is Solomon. So one thing I was wondering about for the Get Pumped Heat Pump campaign. So is that something that just happened, or is there going to be something else going on for that?
It hasn't happened yet. The plan is to roll it out this summer, and actually, this really nests very well with the collaboration we have with the the Heat Pump Collaborative event. So we're engaging contractors through that event, and then we're developing a targeting messaging campaign called Get Pumped that'll be aimed more at residents and to some degree businesses in terms of adopting. And to prepare for all of this, we've been building a runway. Those of you who receive our Climate Action newsletter may recall last month we sent out a survey asking people, like, what are your top of mind thoughts about heat pumps, right? And so we had them in several different categories, and then we also had a write-in possibility. And Diane actually worked on that survey for us and even included randomized order of the items so that we were sure there wasn't a sequence bias at play. Because I'm sure as many of you who are considering a heat pump know, there are many questions around it, right? And as you know, Michelle, whenever you do communication, targeted messaging is really key, right? Not trying to answer every question in a newspaper ad, but trying to really get at the heart of what people need to know to take the next step to find out more. So we've been looking at the results of that survey very closely. We are working on what the exact language is going to be with that campaign, and we're also sharing those results with the Midwest Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative, which is such a mouthful, so that they're aware of it too and can talk about it in their engagement with contractors, just trying to sync it all up. It's a very comprehensive effort for us.
I was wondering about the, well, there's BE5, an education component on the solar installation. You mentioned the online solar dashboard, which I went and clicked on, and it looks really cool, and there's a lot of good information there. I was wondering, how we're sharing that out, or what the plan, what are we doing with that, I guess?
That's a great question. Thank you for it. Part of what we're doing with it is making sure it stays online. That's been a bit of a struggle, but we seem to have ironed it out. We also have been pulling information from it periodically and putting it in the sustainability newsletter. We've used some of the information from it in our reporting to the SolSmart program. And then we're still thinking ahead. Ideally, at some point, what we would like to do is get some signage along the bike ped pathway by the Public Works building, because as you know, that's an award-winning building with many energy-efficient features and solar that was meant to work alongside that. And part of our thinking is that we could put a QR code on the signage for people who are passing by who might just think it's just another concrete brick otherwise, right? And be able to scan it and see real-time data about what's being generated on site there. And then we're also looking at that dashboard to see if we couldn't build a companion dashboard for the solar install that will be going in at the airport later this summer. So if you have favorite features, let us know.
I don't know if this is anything or not, but one thing that kind of jumped out to me was whether or not there might be something we could partner with the school districts or like high school classes that might pull data from it and do a little science project or anything interesting, and then you're kind of pulling in an education component with the students too. That might be interesting.
If only Ben Grimm weren't skipping out today. That's a great idea. Thank you. Any others?
For the Develop Climate Ambassador Program, is there changes to that, or is that just kind of ongoing as it has been?
There are changes to that program we're very excited about, actually. As you may or may not know, the vision for that program was always that it was going to be in-person meetings, and then the pandemic happened, so we've been conducting those trainings online and then offering follow-up tours at the facilities. This next training will be held in person by and large, and we have rolled several facility tours into it so that people will be able to go and see EV charging at our transit hub, for example. But we've also taken that as an opportunity to just try to give the curriculum a refresh. One of the things we'll be doing a little differently for those of you who've gone through the program is instead of having a week that's dedicated to looking at buildings and a week that's dedicated to looking at transportation and a week that's dedicated to looking at waste, we're actually going to divide up the participants and assign small groups to become experts on that part of the plan. And then we're going to have the following meeting, we'll have representatives of our staff there to meet with them and do kind of a deep dive into that section and have them report out on it to the group as a whole. So it's a way of trying to encourage ambassadors to take a little more ownership of the information right from the beginning. And we're also, in the past, those of you who've gone through it before may recall, we as to graduate from the program, you had to have a conversation with 10 people about the climate action plan. And part of that was because when the ambassador program was first developed, not a lot of people knew there was a climate action plan in Iowa City. And it was a way of encouraging people to know about the plan, but also to take action, right? And to have those conversations. We're kind of operating on the assumption that it's more well known, partly because we've been mailing things to every household in the city, that we have a plan. And so what we're doing now is actually borrowing a piece from the Climate Resilience Corps program we had, which you may recall had participants pack starter kits to develop a home resilience kit. We're going to be providing the supplies for that and asking that participants now engage directly with neighbors and deliver those kits the same way the Climate Resilience Corps participants would. So now you're not just handing out information, you're also handing out some material and having some discussion related to neighborhood resilience. So a lot of, I think, really, I'm excited about these changes and interested to see how they run. So we'll be reporting back, and hopefully these will all be positive tweaks, with an eye, in part, I would say, toward longer-term engagement among our climate ambassadors. And I will also add, as a final note, those of you who've been through it in the past may recall we always invite someone who went through the previous cohort of training to come and talk about what comes next, or, well, talk about the conversations they had with the neighbors. Because we're doing slightly different conversations, we thought this time around, rather than invite someone to come back and say, I talked with my neighbors, this is how it went, we thought we would invite one of you, maybe someone in this room, to come to the final presentation and talk about life after the training and ways that you've carried the efforts forward. And also, actually, we may invite two people back, someone else to talk about applying for climate action grants using the knowledge. So saying you could become a commissioner, you could apply for these grants. There are lots of ways to stay involved.
This is Sturtevant. If somebody was part of the online, like I was, are we able to join the tours afterwards, or is that something that?
You know, this tells me it's a good idea if you want to re-enroll in the program. I don't think that would be a problem, but let us check with Megan when she's back in the office.
Okay.
Zach's already been on all the tours, so.
Well, really only a couple. I'd love to do more as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we can get a list of those and have Megan get in touch.
Yeah.
This is Gate. I have a question on the next item, the resilience hubs. So an MOU was established with neighborhood centers. Can you talk a little bit about Empowered Solutions that you contracted, and like how long for the pilot will you do until you decide to expand Or
Yes, so Empowered Solutions is a relatively new planning entity. It was founded in part by Tamara Marcus, who some of you may know was the sustainability manager for Lynn County. She's amazing. She has a PhD, which means she's officially smarter than us, and was key in establishing resilience hubs, a couple of them up in Cedar Rapids. As it turned out, she also had existing connections with the neighborhood centers of Johnson County. So as we were going through the process and talking about what the planning stages might be for the first phase, it just became very apparent that Tam was a natural fit with that business and could provide information. She was very familiar with all the resources we had already looked at and had already helped establish them, so she could draw both on real experience and sort of the theoretical framework we were working on. Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County is thrilled to have her working on the project. We are too. And we're hoping we put it in the contract that she would come and present to you all as we near the end of phase one, just to talk about how that process has gone and give you a little insight into it. So that's the first half of your question. The second half, I believe, was about when we might expand it beyond the pilot program. A little bit, we'd like to see how the pilot program goes first, but also we're thinking ahead about potential funding to make sure we have it available. But we do, thanks to the excellent work done by the working group on this project, have a list of several other entities sort of in the wings that we're thinking about reaching out to when we get to that stage. So some of the groundwork has been laid, we just don't have a firm timeline on it. The memo we submitted, if this helps, suggests that somewhere in year 2 or 3 of the pilot project, we would start looking to the next entity.
What's the timeline for phase one? Is that year still? I remember the working group
Yes,
was.
so it was divided into, there is phase 1, 2, and 3, and phase 1 was the planning year. And I can say that NCJC has elected to, you might remember there was a suite of options you could choose from based on what made sense to your organization. NCJC has opted to do some continuity of operations for emergency planning, actually in collaboration with Johnson County Public Health and the Emergency Management Administration. Is it administration or agency, Jamie?
yeah,
The EMA.
I know. I should know.
The EMA for Johnson County. So they're going to be involved in that process. They're also just doing some broader resilience planning for their facilities, thinking about what would help bolster the resilience of the facilities they currently operate. And they're also thinking ahead to a new location they hope to open. So they're going to be doing planning that really comes up with a vision for all of those. And then our hope, even though it's built on a calendar year, keep in mind the city's fiscal year ends at the end of June. Our hope is that we can get it tied up by the end of this fiscal year, and then we could be moving into phase 2 in the next fiscal year, which starts in July, so that we'd be able to rapidly move from planning to implementation. And phase 2 is really 2 years of sustained financial support to help implement whatever comes up through the planning process in phase 1. Our new members, just wave your hand if you feel completely lost in any of these conversations, and we'll backtrack. Yeah.
Yes, Fraser, Sustainable Lifestyle Development Climate Action Strategic Communications Plan. We already talked about Get Pumped. What Are You campaign, September, October? I'm particularly interested in the months of June, July, and September and October. Is there something happening in November that worries me, and I want as many messages out there as positive as possible relative to the benefits of everyone of any political persuasion to believe in this, follow through on this, care about this, because I have some deep fears relative to what might not even be allowed to be discussed after November. I'll stay out of the politics, or try to, Tell me about the What Are You campaign. I'm a little vague on it.
Yeah, so the What Are You campaign, as you'll recall, is a campaign that was really tied to our insulation grants. And it really, when we thought through that campaign, one of the things we realized is, we're always talking about our values and not a lot of people know what they are. So that campaign was really focused on just some basic information on what is an R value. How could you tell if you're a non-professional that you might need more insulation in your attic? You'll recall it has Goldie in the contractor glasses and hard hat, or safety glasses, I should say. Going up into an attic and saying, if you can see your floor joist, chances are you need more insulation. We've run that campaign for 2 years now and have gotten a good response, but like all campaigns, it could use a little refresh. And so one of the things we're going to do, or we think we're going to do for this refresh in September and October, it's actually kind of cute. One of the other indicators of airflow in the house that you may have a leaky house is if you have cobwebs. Because spiders, nature's very smart, right? Spiders tend to build their webs over areas where there's airflow coming in and out of the house because that is how the bugs get in, right? And so we have this idea to kind of tie it to a holiday theme and talk about like, hey, if you're looking around and seeing cobwebs in your house, chances are, you could benefit from some air sealing and insulation, and then provide information about our home energy audits and then also our insulation grants. So it's a way of just continuing to try to keep that top of mind for folks and give people something else to look for and lose sleep over, I guess.
Can I assume that spiders invade both Republican and Democratic houses?
As far as I know.
I just think it's really important to hammer these two messages really hard this next 5-6 months. Mm-hmm. And I would do anything myself to add some passion to those campaigns. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what that would be, but I think we need to get our voices out loud and clear between now and November, and hope it's contagious and it happens, we can spread the word beyond Iowa City, mm-hmm. particularly to Des Moines. Back to my Des Moines concerns. And I know we're Iowa City, and that's a challenge.
I will say we're quite excited about the film we think we're going to be screening for Climate Fest. That includes a call to vote at the end of it, and we're hoping to find a nonpartisan organization that could come and be present at that event to help register folks to vote. So got a little bit going for you, John. But we'll continue to think of other options.
Thank you.
Talk to me after the meeting.
This is Sturdivant. Has there been any change on the route for trees? I know we discussed that 1 or 2 meetings ago, but
Only that it's going gangbusters, and we get closer every year to like hitting the ceiling of our budget. It may be a bit of a white knuckle finish this year, which would be a very exciting development.
is there any more outreach for that? Or is it just kind of on autopilot now?
It's kind of on autopilot. I mean, we do send out messaging about it. We include it in utility inserts. We have some press releases that go out. We do every so often give it a little injection. You may recall a couple months ago, we celebrated the 1,000th tree that was planted, and then we got a whole bunch more applications as we move into spring, or I guess are moved into spring. At this point, we'll send out another reminder to folks to redeem those vouchers that they already have and let folks know that there's still time to apply for one. But that program's going strong. That's been a real success for us.
Shetty here, could you talk about the equity review of neighborhood and population outreach? It's AP4.
Yes. So as part of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, we are going to be conducting outreach within Iowa City. But as you may recall, one of the things we did with that is establish that we wanted a regional climate action plan. And not every community is as far along in their climate planning activities. That regional plan is going to cover a 6-county area. And so some of the tools that we use may not be as applicable in smaller, more rural areas. The equity concerns might look different than what they look like here. And so one of the things we did as part of that grant was carve out some funding to contract with the University of Iowa. Oh my goodness, her first name's Amy, and I'm going to do her the complete disservice of not remembering her last name. Thank you, Amy Colbert, in the Tippie College of Business. And they've been doing a comprehensive review of equity strategies and any sort of existing research on equitable outreach and engagement to put together a toolkit that we can use in our engagement efforts and that the outlying communities can use, and that ECOG, who is realistically going to be doing the lion's share of the outreach, will be able to do. This probably doesn't mean as much to most folks in this room, but I can say as somebody who came from working for a council of governments, the kind of engagement that councils of governments usually do tends to be what I call grass tips engagement. So you might go and talk to the economic development directors for every county, right? Or the elected officials or the people who are kind of higher up. And it's very hard for those organizations, just because of their regional scope, to do the grassroots kind of engagement that we really think of as the bread and butter of advancing equity. And so in part, we wanted this toolkit developed to give them some really valuable tools as they conduct this work as well. And I'll also say, one of the other really important things for us in developing it, and when I say us, I mean the participating communities that have been on the steering committee, so Cedar Rapids as well as Johnson County and Lynn County, is we really wanted to look at models of co-creation and how to move toward that. So it's not just check the box engagement where you show up in a community and you say, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think? Great. Okay, it's happening. Don't like it so much? It's going to happen anyway, right? We don't want that. So it's really looking about how do you engage and maintain that engagement.
This is Gade. How do you foresee that being, replicated with different programs? Will it really be program specific of, your program, or would that be able to be applied to like other programs, like that the city does or that the county does?
Our hope is that it will be applicable across departments and divisions, but of course we have to see the toolkit to know for sure.
Yeah. No, that'd be a wonderful resource.
How long has Amy Colbert been involved in this? She's just an outstanding person and a great researcher. I wasn't aware of that work going on. Has it been for some time?
It's only been for a few months, but yeah, I will second that. I've been very impressed with the conversations we've been having and just the depth of the research that's happening. So I'm feeling tentatively optimistic that we'll get a good end product out of it. And I'll just add as one final note, like part of the thinking behind that is, one, we really want a robust regional climate action plan, right? But two, with the climate pollution reduction grant, we were given grant money to do the planning. There's no guarantee that we will get funding for implementation to flow after it. So part of what we were thinking in building that carve-out is what kinds of things can we put under a planning umbrella that are products we can have, even if we never get any federal funding from this project. We will still have something that we can use and that will continue to impact climate planning in our region going forward. These are all such excellent questions. Can I call out one thing that our staff are very excited about in this? It's easy to miss. You may recall that last year we entered into a partnership with the Iowa City Area Association of Realtors to do a green designations course. That flowed from a previous effort we had had where we provided 5 scholarships to send realtors to Des Moines to participate in that training, and that went so well we were like, why don't we offer it here so as many people can participate as possible. ICAR, it turns out, really loved that training. And we recently found out, wholly independent of us, they have taken ownership of it and are going to be offering that training again for area realtors. And the trainer who came in to perform it loved her time in Iowa City so much, she offered to write her own grant to fund herself to come here and do that training. So that was, in some ways, in many ways, a little project where we decided to take a chance on something, and boy, has it paid dividends. Like, it's so nice to see that kind of buy-in. So we've been really chuffed about it.
It has become sustainable.
This is Sturdivant. I've spoken to a couple of realtors that have gone through it, and they said it was not like in a bad way, but like eye-opening and changing in how they approach things. So congratulations and thank you for that effort.
As Michelle rightly pointed out, it's now sustainable. It's self-sustaining.
This is Sturdivant. I do have one question on essentially the last one on the list, the Sustainability Operations Guide for Iowa City Organizations. What is that?
That's another one that it surfaced as we were looking for, like, where are the areas that we have some questions about or just haven't seen a lot of movement on. One was, it relates to the idea that we would develop an operations guide to forward sustainability here in the city operations, and then the idea was that it would be shared out to area businesses who might like to follow suit, or organizations. As we have put our feelers out about this in the community and had conversations with it, one of the things that's become very clear is that people don't necessarily look to government to tell them how to run their operations, and may in fact be hostile to it. The other thing that's become clear in those conversations is that organizations, organizations are very unique, right? What works for a Procter & Gamble might not work for a mom and pop restaurant out on Highway 6, right? And so to come up with one operations guide that's going to meet everybody's needs may not be practicable. But just because it may not work as originally conceived, one of the things we're doing is trying to figure out, all right, well, what could we do with this, and what are other directions we might be able to move in? And one thing, actually, that I'll say we're quite excited about is we've been working with our purchasing department and the accounting here in Iowa City, just thinking about, like, what does sustainable purchasing practices look like? And as a result of those conversations, Iowa City is also going to be hosting a convening of all the municipal purchasing officers for the state of Iowa in May, to be held down in Terry Trueblood. And we have been working with them to line up some national speakers and folks from other cities and other states to talk about what sustainable procurement policies look like for them and what might be able to be adopted for cities. So even though some businesses may not want to hear from us about how to embrace more sustainable operations, other cities certainly do. And we've just been so excited about the way that that event is coming together. And it all stems from, just that basic conversation that we have all the time, like, this thing is in the climate action plan. What do you think? What can we do? How could we move this forward? So some exciting stuff happening there.
Fraser, one more time. There's so many of you that are relatively new. If your predecessors were here, they'd go, here goes John again on ROI, return on investment. The bottom line is people will buy sustainably if there's something in it for them. So it's back to WIFM. What's in it for me? That's what we as an organization need to sell to every member of any audience. We're trying to convince that this is a good way to go. They ain't going to do it for patriotic reasons. They're ultimately going to do it because it positively impacts their bottom line. And so one of my main goals is always, as we look at these things, is how can I sell this to whatever audience? And each audience is different, as you've just pointed out. And so we've got to really understand our audiences and understand what triggers them and what's in it for them and what will cause them to want to get on board and have passion and support what we're doing. It's not a singular message for the entire audience. So we really need to understand the realtors. We really need to understand the purchasing agents. And why is this going to be good? It's not to save whales and polar bears. It's to make you more effective, more efficient, and your operation run more smoothly and bottom line be more profitable. That's sad, but they're not going to do it if there's not profit in it. And our biggest challenge is to get to the point where we can show profitability for going green to every person that we need to talk to. I'm sorry, it's, you've heard that message from me 1,000 times, but most of the people in here haven't. Not that you don't know it, you understand it, but I think we need to reflect on that and never forget that no one cares about polar bears. They care about their bottom line. They may claim that they care about polar bears, but they're not going to do anything painful or causing major change in their operations until they see positive cash flow for them. So, goodbye, I'll shut up.
Thanks for that reminder. So,
One thing I was wondering about is with the collaboration with the library on the native plantings, I was just wondering if that's already in the works and what that might look like.
yeah, that is already in the works. The library approached us. Those of you who go to the library know that they have 2 planters out on the Ped Mall. They recently received a donation from a longtime patron of the library who wanted to provide funding for 2 years of dedicated, basically converting one of them into a native planter, featuring native Iowan plants. We've been talking with the library who approached us about just collaborating on what plants might go in there. We quickly referred them to Tyler Baird, who knows more about such things, but also what the messaging might be around it. And one of the things, actually, I'm really excited about, we're going to have a sign there talking about how even ground level plants can mitigate against the heat island effect. So it'll be piggybacking a bit on some of the information we have from our heat island mapping opportunities. And I think even the sign's going to link to that so that folks can learn more. But, you know, most people, when we think about mitigating heat islands, think about trees providing shade. We don't realize that even ground level plants, through the process of evapotranspiration, can help cool the air significantly. And what better place to talk about that than on the Ped Mall, right, where it's bricks and concrete all around. So there's going to be some signage. There's also, we're talking about doing some wraparound programming around it, including bringing back My Garden of 1,000 Bees, the film that we screened last year as part of the Climate Fest, having another screening at the library that's hopefully a little better attended, and bringing in like the Iowa Beekeepers Association to talk about how these things support pollinators, and there's just some really interesting ideas, I think, bubbling up for it. So hopefully we'll have some details dialed in the next time we meet. Well, in the interest of time, I'll just say if any other questions come up as you're musing upon this, you all are always welcome to email our office and ask for more detail, and we're happy to follow up with any one of you on any one of these items. As you can tell, we have many, many irons in the fire, so we couldn't possibly get to them all and still have time for our lovely guest. The next item on the agenda then was returning to our, sorry, Sarah, false alarm. Returning to our ongoing discussion about visioning and metrics, and I just want to say thanks to you all for like all the time and effort you've invested in all those discussions. The visioning that you've done is so helpful in guiding the work of our office, because as you can tell, when we have just one word sentences or phrases about what we're supposed to be doing, that doesn't always give us a full picture of where we should be steering toward. So those visions that you've outlined have been just really useful and spawned a lot of great conversations within our office. But of course, this project began with a discussion about maybe proposing some metrics to measure things. And we, in our last discussion, we're talking about equity. And the reason we wanted to end on that note of equity before going into the metrics is because so many times, and we see this in many different fields, that it's really important to be conscious about the numbers you assign to anything, if only for the potential for equity impacts of that. And what I mean by that is if we look, for example, thinking about standardized testing in schools, right? Once we had numbers attached to those testing outcomes, what you saw is a lot of teaching toward the test, and things that didn't get assigned those same numbers suffered in contrast. So we wanted to begin with just an awareness that anything we assign a number to will inevitably become a priority, and be mindful of that as we think through that. So to help with this, rather than make you look through the list of visions one more time, we thought it would be useful to go back to first principles and just look at the broad categories of actions that were included in the Climate Action Plan. And so that is the, apologies for the very tiny font, the document that each of you have at your place setting, that lists what are the key areas that we have actions in. And then, of course, you know, from the CAP update, these are then further broken down into individual actions. But we really want to stay on the level of like areas rather than actions in thinking about what the priorities would be. So what we wanted to do, if this works for you, is give everybody a minute just to scan through that list and think if you had to, from an equity lens, pick the top 3 priorities, what would they be on this list? And we thought we'd give you a few minutes to do that, and then maybe we'd go around the room and just start with folks either identifying what you think 3 priority areas would be, or offering up some related metrics that you have been thinking about. Or you can just offer metrics and not think about the priority areas. But any of that feedback, I think, would be helpful for us as we think through next steps for that project. So I will keep an eye on my watch. And let's maybe say 3 minutes. Does that work? 3 minutes for 3 priorities?
This is Sturdivant. Just if we're looking at this, if some things that are already in progress, such as asset mapping exercise. I know we did the heat island maps, but I mean, you know, something similar, or like the extreme weather preparedness planning. What, if it's already in progress, should we still raise it, lower it, or?
No, I think if you feel like that's a priority action, then whether or not it, I mean, hopefully if it's a priority, we are working on it, but it's fair to say that you think it should continue to be so.
This is Ayan Lynch. I'll just say, when Sarah and I started this conversation about doing this visioning practice, the idea of the metrics was to come to help, like we have, obviously we're trying to reduce greenhouse gases. But as we try to look at this whole climate action plan and understand, like, how do we look at when we get these progress updates? You know, it's a lot of like project-based, which is awesome. We're doing a lot of things. But how do we know, how do we think about, are the actions we're taking making the impacts that we're intending them to have? So what would those high-level metrics be, or sort of like indicator, like leading indicators be that these different projects we're undertaking are having an impact, even though like some of them are, it's all of this stuff, like we want to do all of these things, but they're not necessarily going to show up in our greenhouse gas emissions report, or at least
Almost
anytime.
none of them will. And yeah, and as you'll recall, we shared the report last year that talked about how it was called, I forget the title of it, but it was local climate planning, right? A state of affairs. And it was talking about how many of the things that happen on the local level just don't show up in greenhouse gas inventories. And we've had discussions ourselves about the plateau we're going to look at now that Mid-American has achieved 100% renewable energy, right? And so we need to be thinking about other ways that we tell the story about the work we're doing, and make sure that it's reflecting the values that we have for this plan. Thanks for that important background. Gabe, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. This is Sturdivant. So I kind of combine stuff. You know, one thing leads to another. I think the 1.4 on-site renewable energy and electrification is probably, I mean, I know we're trying to work on that, but I think that's a big priority, especially for, you know, the remodeling and revamping of homes and things. Then my second one is 2.4, compact and contiguous development. I'm guessing that's like a 15-minute city thing. I think that's important. And then, so I had, under waste is the recycling at multifamily properties and composting of organics. I tied that to 5.2, which is expanding gardens and local foods. Because if you're, you know, if you have gardens, you'd probably want to compost it at some point. So that those two kind of tie together for me. And then I like 4.3 just because that's kind of my background, public health stuff. So those are that's my list, but that.
Did you have any suggested metrics tied to them? You don't have to.
It'd be nice to see kind of, I mean, I know the city's doing what it can, kind of, hey, we adapted this, here's how, you know, adding this building decreased, you know, traffic volume, or like what they're going to be doing downtown, and it looks like reducing parking, kind of narrowing that street, but, you know, getting rid of it. It looks more like a walkable area. It'd just be nice to see there, you know, there's less accidents. There's just the numbers associated with those. Kind of, you know, we spent X millions of dollars to do this, and here's what happened out of it. And I would like to see, like, you know, for like the organics and the waste and things, I know that a lot of that comes from the sanitation and trash areas, but I would like community input, like from community organizations saying, hey, we need recycling here, here, and here. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've come up with.
Jamie, you want to go next?
Sure. Wow, it's really hard to find 3 priorities from this. And of course, you know, I have things that sound really interesting, but it's like what's going to give us the most bang for our buck, I guess, and it's hard to determine too. But I kind of focus, so in buildings, 1.1, increasing energy efficiency in residences. I think that's really important. 1.6 also, I think, is important. I don't have any suggested metrics for this. I'm sure you have many that you know that I don't. And then 2.1, I think, is really important, especially, you know, with Fare Free. It's been really great. I think we've seen like a really great outlook, I guess, from that so far. But maybe evaluating areas for improvement or expansion, see, how people are using it. I don't know if that's probably something we can figure out in a way. And then, I mean, that's 3, but I think if I were to pick another one or a couple, 5.3 and 5.4, I think, are also really, I would be interested in as well.
Thank you. Brenda?
Sure. I agree wholeheartedly that this is really hard to pick 3. I agree with everything under buildings, but I'll say 1.4 and 5 kind of lean into electrify everything with solar, and all kinds of electrification I think will help. Mid-American can probably help with metrics on that. I know they're 100% renewable, but we can continue to reduce other sources of energy use. My second pick would be 2.1 for public transit systems. For equity, maybe reconsidering routes, Sunday buses, a more regional transit plan, all of those things I think to consider moving forward would be helpful. I really like expanding Iowa City's tree canopy. I would add native plantings to that too. I really don't know if there are maps out there with what we have now and maybe where all the trees are planted with the Root for Trees program, that kind of thing. And maybe even community-wide surveys, participatory action research to find out what the differences are in mental health and greening spaces and how that changes attitudes in the community. I'll stop there.
Just to respond about the tree mapping, the Parks and Rec Commission just underwent a large comprehensive tree. So they have mapped out where all the trees are just a couple years ago, so that has recently been done. So that actually was also on my list about expanding Iowa City's tree canopy, even though I'm aware that the city has pretty much done what they can do, and that's why we've done Root for Trees, so that homeowners are also doing it. I think from an equity lens, recently reading about when you think about weather-related disasters to human life or human accidents and health, I was reading that it's really heat is the most common. It's not like a tornado or a hurricane or, heat is the biggest source, and then all the others are combined. And so I was just, I think, thinking in that heat lens of, and then for the equity population too, again, 4.2 of kind of that resilience hub model too, of how do we connect and communicate an outreach plan with our vulnerable populations in regards to when we have excessive climate and heat events. And then, of course, I'm going to choose increasing bike and pedestrian transportation as well. Just after housing, transportation is the second most costly expense for, people, and just having equitable transportation options. Fare free is really exciting, but buses don't go in all communities, and we do. So I think bikes can fill in some of that gap.
Yeah, I agree with everything so far. But picking just a few, I kind of highlighted 1.4 as well, the on-site renewable energy systems and electrification. And I'm also thinking about storage there as well for load leveling and resilience as well, and just the resilience of the grid. And then I kind of focused on 2.2 as well, I think, electric vehicles and then other emerging technologies, green hydrogen and things like that. And maybe partnering with ICAD or other development agencies. And I think Iowa City has a great resource with the university here and a lot of really highly educated people and a lot of really highly educated students who then maybe often don't have jobs to go to like I didn't when I graduated, and so we have to go away. But if we can bring technology companies and things like that, I think that's a really good thing. And that's obviously not a blanket statement, but, that was my experience. Anyway, 2.5 also as well, employee commuter options. I think it would be amazing to see passenger rail. I know that's a regional thing, and there's a lot of moving parts, and I think somebody talked recently about that here, but I think it's something that should stay on the radar.
This is Murray. I am horrible at choosing favorite things because there are so many on here. So I don't know if these are my favorite, but the three that I guess stick out to me right now would be the increasing the compact and contiguous development. And I saw that kind of is going hand in hand with expanding Iowa City's tree canopy. In addition to planting trees, I think it would be great if we could focus on keeping green spaces. Those are really important. And if you had more compact development, you'd have then the ability to perhaps keep more land green. And then also the expanding community gardens and access to healthy and local foods to me stands out as something that would really target equity. But I think in addition to that, there might have to be programs that would be offered where people would go out and show people how to have a garden, because just saying, here's the land, if you've never had a garden, or if you don't have a really green thumb like me, then you might need a little bit of help with that. But those were the three that I focused on.
You'll be shocked to know that my first one's 5.4, because I think it has an overriding impact on everything else that we're looking at. Now, maybe when that was put under sustainable lifestyle, people weren't considering it as related to everything else, but I certainly see that it is. 1.1's a biggie, in my opinion. I couldn't stick with just 3. I also like combining 1.4 and 1.5, as somebody has already done. And my last one's the tree canopy. I think about, wouldn't have prevented it, but because of the climate change, the derecho that impacted Cedar Rapids, maybe somebody knows the exact percentage, but they lost 80% or something like that of their tree canopy. And I was gone. I was doing climate action research in Mexico, but during those early January storms, we lost a lot of trees here in Iowa City, particularly evergreens, because of strange weather and the ice and the snow weighting down trees. I lost 5 trees in my yard, just totally gone. I'm just shocked because they were 25, 30 years old, and I never thought in my lifetime I would lose them. They just got weighted down and fell over, and on their way down, knocked down other trees. So I think tree canopy is a big deal too. But I go back to, you got to finance these things, and you got to show the monetary return to the audience.
This is Einan Lynch. I was trying to focus on what are the big picture kind of shifts that I think need to happen. So I think 2.4, increased compact and contiguous development, is a really important sort of systemic shift and change in how we're thinking about how we do things. I think there's a couple of metrics that we could look at to kind of measure the impacts of that change, or measure if we're making that change effectively. So if we were more compact, I would think it would be, and with the bike master plan, I would think that we would have more people able to bike for commuting or take alternative modes of transportation as their main source. So number of people biking as their commuting. Also, like square foot per capita, like in your house, like are we shrinking the average size of the houses that we're building? I think would be a leading indicator if we're kind of shrinking in that development. Or like square footage of pavement per capita would be, I think, another interesting metric to look at. Like, are we actually just not making as many roads because we're not sprawling as far, or we're prioritizing bike travel over big lane car travel? My second area is in waste, like just reducing consumption overall. So kind of that 3.3 there's maybe some other things in there. I thought a good indicator for that would just be tons of waste in the landfill would be a good indicator if we're reducing our consumption and finding other ways to divert that waste or reuse that waste. And then finally, encouraging the purchasing of local products and responsible purchasing. I think our greenhouse gas inventory goes up a lot because we are shipping so much in, and I think it's so great that we are also measuring, like, you know, what we are having shipped here goes into that inventory, which is awesome. But I think we have a big shift to make in how we purchase things. So I think just like the number of dollars spent locally, so I think it's great that you're doing this whole procurement workshop. But it would be cool, I mean, maybe we even start with like city purchasing, because it would be hard to measure the whole city, but, or, you know, residents, but maybe it's just how much as a city are we able to spend locally, and can we prioritize that?
I wanted to echo what John said, because looking at this list, it's very difficult to choose any one priority, right? All of these are such great ideas, but the question that I have about any of them, and I can narrow down a list of 2 or 3 that I think are the most important, like you mentioned, the increased compact and contiguous development. I think that's like such a systemic change that needs to occur. But the question that I have about all of these is like, how do we do that? And 5.4 is the only thing on here actually that does answer that question, is like, well, it's going to take money. Like, we can't just like tell you guys, hey, go and, you know, increase compact and contiguous development. Like, the baseline you're going to need at least is money for that. So yeah, I think that one's actually hugely important. 5.4 is like, I don't know what that looks like applying for grants, that sort of thing. Metrics wise, just like, hopefully the money just goes up, and that, you know, we just see that happening. Then the other ones, I would say, just to echo again, the increased compact and contiguous development, I think, is so important in so many ways. Like, you know, if you're growing green space per capita, and, you know, just creating more walkable, livable communities, you can go into existing communities and retrofit them in some ways to increase that livability and walkability. You can, for future development, perhaps adopt like green codes that require that development to be more contiguous, more compact. And then the other one I would say is, just increase on-site renewable energy systems and electrification. There's so many important things in that buildings piece there. But I think that's, you know, the big thing that we all want to accomplish, right, is eventually moving away from fossil fuels entirely. And that's what I got.
So the ones that I picked are just totally random. They just jumped out at me. So one I put was initiate community solar projects. And so I thought, you know, one of the things we could show for metrics would be money savings as a result. And then increase compact and contiguous development. And then also analyze climate-related public health impacts in Iowa City.
Awesome, thank you. Clearly, we're going to need to carry this conversation forward to another month, but this is helpful. We'll try to compile this similar to the way we did before and show where some of these priorities were rising to the top. Did you have one more, Jamie?
I just have a thought. It was mentioned, you know, like money is how we do this, but also I think we do it by like policy change as well. It's a huge area, and I think it's kind of tricky, especially as a government employee. You can educate and we can advocate, but obviously we can't tell people how to vote or how to you know, take action specifically. But yeah, I mean, nothing hurts, you know, checking out of work and, you know, going with my baseball cap and like, you know, actually telling folks how to maybe change policies. But yeah, I think that's maybe an area we could really look at locally and statewide as well. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and especially in the legislative session, things aren't looking great always. So, yeah, I don't know if we can keep an eye on policies, and if there's a way, a call to action too that you see fit, that we could jump into, then I think that would be great.
I think there could be more opportunity for us to recommend policy changes to council.
Yeah.
Also, like there's policy at the local level that we could be impacting.
Yeah.
All right, Sarah. We have 10 minutes left. And
go quickly.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, if this works for you, Sarah, do you want to run through your presentation? And then if anybody has any questions, you could email them to me and I'll forward them on to Sarah. Or we can invite Sarah back on a lighter meeting date. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I would suggest that we get an overview, and to be fair to her and all the effort that she puts in, that we invite her back. And after we see an overview and study it a little bit, then we'll have more significant questions for her that she could
Sure,
answer.
sure.
I feel very badly that
No,
we've
no,
taken
no,
all
don't
this
feel
time away from her, because she's got a topic that's really important.
All right, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Rolling then, we'll get rolling. So the Iowa City Bicycle Master Plan was worked on for about a year and a half. It was adopted late in the summer in 2017. And am I going to be able to make this work? Oh, there we go. Right now, just within the city of Iowa City, we have about 27 miles of trails off-street. Local trails, 10 miles. Those are more not part of really a transportation system, but like connections between things. Side paths, those are the wide sidewalks that you think of, like along Scott Boulevard and places like that, that are like a street side trail, and about 17 miles of bike lanes. In the downtown, I won't go through every one of these, but the downtown is one of the areas where we've seen a lot of the bike lanes coming in. Obviously, Market and Jefferson Street we've had for a while. Last year, those were expanded to make them buffered bike lanes. We now have a 4 to 3 lane conversion on Madison Street and on Clinton Street. We've got bicycle turn boxes, which is my next slide. And then bike lanes on Burlington Street. A lot of people are intimidated by Burlington Street. I'm comfortable biking on it most times a day, but once you get across the river, you got to pick the right time of day to go up that hill with all the buses and traffic. The good thing is that in the next few years, they're going to start with designing the replacement for the Burlington Street Bridge, and that's going to be major changes for improvements for both bicycle and pedestrian travel. I won't go in depth into the bicycle turn boxes, but that's another feature. On the west side, this last year, we got bike lanes on Benton Street between Greenwood and Mormon Trek Boulevard a few years ago. We have both the bike lanes. Again, Mormon Trek is probably not a place where a lot of people would bike. That was a 4 to 3 lane conversion that we did for safety reasons, allocating space to the bike lanes. That also has a side path, but things are changing on the west side slowly. East side neighborhoods, the Court Hill Trail is a major east-west corridor for folks. We have side paths on a number of streets, American Legion Road. So now we're seeing as development happens as part of our complete streets policy, when those arterials are built, they're automatically built with the buffered bike lane and the wide side path on one side. And that's to cover 2 different types of bicyclists. I'm a bicyclist who's comfortable. I don't ride in like or anything, but I'm comfortable on riding on most streets. Not everyone is. So for the younger rider, the inexperienced rider, that wide side path on the side of the road is for them. Taft Avenue will be constructed in the next few years. And again, with our complete streets policy, that will get the buffered bike lanes and the side path as well. The south side neighborhoods, and talk about equity, our bicycle master plan focused a lot on equity. We have bike lanes on the full length of Sycamore Street from the highway south. McAllister Boulevard was created with bicycle lanes and a side path.
South Gilbert Street has a side path. We'll be getting bike lanes south of the highway this next construction season. And then, of course, an extensive trail system. The Highway 6 trail from Hines Road on the far east side to Fair Meadows was built this last year. That was kind of done out of sequence. There's a gap in the middle there where you see highlighted in yellow. That segment of the Highway 6 trail will start construction in 25 or 26. That out-of-sequence segment was done to help kids out in the mobile home parks get to school. A lot of kids use that route to get to Southeast Junior High and City High, and we thought that was important to get that in there. Protected bike lanes, there's discussion of that. The City Council wants to see those. We're looking at bollards. My understanding is that we'll be working with a consultant, hopefully, on that to get protected bike lanes in some locations. Education also is an important component, so educating bicyclists about where they need to be on the road to ride safely. We're changing out those share the road signs in some locations to the bicyclists may use full lane signs, so getting bicyclists out of the habit of riding in the gutter, which is not a safe place to ride. Educating motorists on how to pass bicyclists is another thing that we're working on. Happily, bicycle collisions have been trending down for a long time. And in fact, metro-wide, if we look at the entire metro area, including Coralville, North Liberty, this last year was the first year in a while that we had no serious injuries or fatalities among bicyclists within the metro area. And deaths are rare within city limits. I don't know the last time that we had one within city limits. Out on the higher speed roads, that does happen at times, but rarely. We don't have a way to measure bicycle traffic on the streets other than we do peak hour in-person counts that vary from year to year. And we count pedestrians and bicyclists in those, but it'll be some years before we can show you like a trend line, but the activity on our trails continues to go up. One important trail that was built in the last few years was an extension of a part of the Iowa River Corridor Trail that runs, if you're along Rocky Shore Drive, there's a park called Crandick Park that's right up next against the Crandick Railroad, a trail segment that runs between there and Coralville. And there's a lot of student housing over in Coralville there near the Iowa River Landing. That trail segment is getting a lot of activity, so that connects both as a commuter trail and a recreational trail. By the way, our trail system now, you could start at Terry Trueblood and ride all the way to Tiffin, and you'd be on street on Normandy Drive. That's about it. So really great trail system. Education, we have a series of video shorts that are on YouTube, and we share them on social media, and we encourage any organization that wants to claim them as your own if you want to, that cover different aspects of bicycle safety. We do a bicycle-friendly driver program with our transit folks in all the communities, and I'm trying to get it started with CAN Bus, educating bus drivers about how to drive safely around bicyclists. We also have a Bicycle Rules of the Road handout that goes over the rules of the road, and that's in several different languages. Let me see if I can remember them. Arabic, Chinese, French, Swahili, Spanish. I think there maybe is one other. So we have those available. And again, one of those things, we publish this thing, we don't do programming, but any organization that wants to use them anywhere can have them. We're hoping to do in the next several years branding and wayfinding to sort of call more attention to our bike trails, not just in Iowa City, but throughout the region. And then I just want to acknowledge our partners. I realize this is very shortened. The Iowa City Bike Library, I cannot say enough about. I cannot say enough about that organization. Inclusive, equity, just in every way, enthusiasm, working with people who are inexperienced bicyclists, just really a gem. Bike Iowa City is sort of an organization, but they're a go-to online. If you do bikeiowacity.org, you can get their calendar. There are bicycle events almost every night of the week and several nights of the week throughout the year for all levels of bicyclists. Bicyclists of Iowa City, more of a riding club. They do a lot of educational work. And then partnerships with the neighborhood centers of Johnson County, the Iowa City South District neighborhoods and the South of Six Business District are very gung-ho about pushing bicycling. Obviously, they have all those great trails and stuff down there. And then our local bike shops and Big Grove have really been, as private businesses, have really been pushing bicycling forward. So I think Iowa City, we are getting to the end of some of the, of most of the items that were identified infrastructure-wise in the city. We'll be getting bike lanes on Sunset Street this year, and then again, Gilbert Street south of the highway. So at some point, we'll have to revisit the plan in the next few years and look for more things to do or ways to improve things. Some of those, I think, will coincide with some things that we want to do with pedestrians as well. The MPO, I also work for the MPO of Johnson County. We won't get into that. But anyway, we got a large federal grant to do a metro-wide safety action plan for all of the communities in the metro. And so we will be working on that over the next year or so, and hopefully we'll identify more projects out of that. But that's as quickly as I could do it. I know you guys are interested also, I think the bicycle-friendly community designation, which is done through the League of American Bicyclists. And when we adopted the master plan, part of the goal of the master plan, as seen through the city council, was to get gold status. The bike-friendly community application is a very long application. It's a great thing because it gives you a lot of tools to see like areas where you can improve. I would also say it's a very difficult one because they're trying to compare or evaluate cities like Los Angeles, California, and University Heights, Iowa. It's hard to do that. The last round that we did, I think we applied back in 19, I want to say, and I didn't know if we would get gold status. We got silver, but I asked some questions afterward and was not really happy with the answers that I got. One of the reasons Iowa City didn't get the gold standard last time was we didn't have enough bicycle facilities on higher speed roads. And the reason why we don't is we don't have high-speed roads. We have very few high-speed roads. Where we do have them, we have a separated facility. We have a trail, and that doesn't count in their criterion. So they have fortunately updated their criterion, but there's just a lot of complexity that goes into it. And so I don't think people should ultimately be discouraged by whatever designation we have. The most important thing is to get people out bicycling. Another factor that counts to the bicycle-friendly community status is the number of bike commuters that you have measured through the census. Free transit's not going to help with that, but if people are getting on the bus, I think that's okay. So I just think we have to look at, more locally, are people able to get out and do the things that they need and find ways to measure that as much as we trust in the league's certification, so.
Thanks, Sarah.
Did you want to ask a question?
Oh, I'm just writing them down for next time. I know that we're over.
Yeah, and if people want to email me questions or whatever, I'm happy to answer. That was really condensed, so.
The good news is next time you'll be ongoing business, so you'll get up earlier in the agenda.
Okay. It looked like John wanted to ask something.
Something you might think about, and maybe you're way ahead of me. I'm kind of addicted to tourist books, 3 days in Paris or 10 days in whatever. And I can vision, I've done about 18 RAGBRAIs, but now I'm not as adventuresome. And what I'd like to see is a little guidebook that says 10 Iowa City bicycle adventures. Start here and go here and watch out for this when you get to this street and look for this. You'll really enjoy it. It could be written form. It could be video form. but I think it would be something that could be valuable to people that might not be willing to go out and experiment on their own like you do when you're a kid. You'll drive your bike anywhere.
Yeah.
But now a little nervous. I wonder if that's safe going this way or that way.
Yeah,
And as
no,
you
that's a
mentioned,
good
going
point.
up Burlington's okay, but watch the traffic at this time of day.
Yep.
And, I just think there's something there.
I know the Parks Department has done some videos that they've put on social media where they've done sort of like a condensed version or a condensed video of riding a trail segment, which I think is always good because once the trail gets off-street and is in a hidden area, I think particularly for women, there's a reluctance to ride. And so to show people what the trail looks like throughout so that people understand they're safe and active is a good thing. So, yeah.
I'd buy the book.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, Sarah. I was really excited to see you're on the agenda today. I prepared 2 pages of questions, so I won't.
Well, if you do
I-
have questions prepared
I
and you
do,
want to
yeah.
email them to me, then next time when I
Or-
come, I can,
Or can I, run some of them after the meeting with just chat? Or do you
Yeah,
have
for
to?
sure. And I would just say, I'm not fully engaged in when you were prioritizing your things, but I think one thing I often think about when you're thinking about compact and contiguous development, some of that will be redevelopment, of course. And to think about how does the development then change the nature of the street? So there are some areas obviously close to downtown that over time become more dense. Can we close up curb cuts? Can we combine driveways? Can we rely more on alleys? That those things too often we see those things as separate, but redevelopment is that opportunity, if it's done well, to get the street better, to get the wider sidewalk, to get the bike lanes. But the bike lanes function better when they don't have to cross driveways. Same thing with the wide sidewalk. If it's not, if we're keeping more separation and then focusing on creating safety at the intersection, because the intersection, is where the collisions happen. They don't tend to happen mid-block. So something to think about.
Thanks so much for your patience and gracious presentation, Sarah. If you do have questions and want to email them to me, I can pass them on to Sarah, as she said, so that she can come prepared to jump right in and answer them when she comes back.
And she is coming back, right?
I may have to bake her some cookies, but we'll get her back in here.
We promise we'll let you talk sooner.
Recap?
Our next meeting is going to be Monday, April 1st. It is not a joke. We are having it on April Fool's Day. We'll be here from 3:30 to 5 p.m. And the actionable item I have written down from this meeting is to invite Sarah back. All right.
Do we have a motion to adjourn at 5:06?
Einan Lynch, so moved.
Anybody second?
Smith can second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.
All opposed?
Thanks, everyone.